Okay, I've now moved to my reloading station in my workshop, and I like to use a cloth underneath my shell just for keep things from rolling, because if you put it on hardwood, of course, it tends to roll a little bit, and on the towel it doesn't, so I can keep them together a little bit better. Now I want to get my 40 caliber die set, and I will take the very first die out, which is the deprimer. It has the tip that will push the primer out. Also, inside will be the sizer that will size the brass down to the proper size. I've already preset using this nut to prevent it from going too deep, because I've already measured it on how deep it should go. And how deep that should go is determined by setting the shell into the shell holder, which is the piece that I just got out of here, which is this one. It will then go into the press like so, and it pops in, and of course the shell will be set in like so, and it could be moved up and down. Now the die was set by putting this in at a certain place, rolling or raising the press all the way up, moving this piece down until it touched the top of the brass. And that is the way that you set it down. That was without the deprimer. Then you put the deprimer in, and what it ends up doing, as I press this and the shell is now in there, I will push this up, and there's a little pressure here, and the primer should come out. It didn't, so I may have to reset the deprimer a little deeper. There, it did. It came out. And if you look, now the primer is missing. It falls into this from the slot that is in this piece. There's a slot back here. It pops back in there and rolls down into the little tray. The spent primer now is gone. So now I have a deprimed and a sized piece. So now we're ready for the next one and the next one, and right on. Okay, I have all of these now have been run through the deprimer and the sizer, and they're all deprimed and sized. They are ready now for priming, and I'll set up the primer. What we have here is the tray that holds the primers. Then we use the small pistol primers, which is this size right here. It's the CCI brand. It's the 500 small primers, and we will now show you how to assemble the priming tool. The first thing that I must do, and I think I've been through all of this priming with you before, but I will show you completely how to do it again. This is the priming tool, and this is the fence that allows only one to fall through at a time as we set the primers into each shell. What I'm going to have to do, of course, is to use 2 hands on this, and since I'm holding the video with 1 hand, I'm going to have to set it down a moment so that I can take this the fence out, because it takes me 2 hands to do that. I have to unscrew this, take the fence loose from in here, and pull it through to the other side and remove it completely. When I completely remove it, then I have to put the device in that will hold this primer tray. And I'll show you that in just a moment. Now what I have done is I have removed the fence, and it's laying on the table. And I will now have to hold this one with a hand because I can't turn it loose. If it springs open, I will lose the setting that seats the primer at the right depth. So now I'm going to have to stop a moment again and show you how to install the holder that holds the priming tray. What I need to do, of course, is to reach in my box and get the piece that will hold the shell holder. Now I have taken the shell holder out, and it's laying here. This shell holder now will be placed onto the stem that is sticking up of the plastic. I need to place the slot this direction because I'll be putting a bullet or the shell in on this side. The primer will come in from this direction, from the upper side. Alright, now it goes into the shell holder, the primer holder, in this direction, and I'm going to try to do this with 1 hand, and I can't do it, so I'm going to stop it a minute. Now it has been inserted through this hole, as you can see, with the open end on this side, because this is where the primer tray will go. Now we have a hole in the middle that we're going to drop in the seating tool, which is just a long bit of steel. And I have to show you very closely that one end is flat and the other end is rounded. Now you have to be careful that you don't mix that up. So as I look at this, I am going to turn it a bit so that you can see this has a rounded end and the other end is flatter. You want the flat end to go toward the primer because it must seat flatly. If the rounded end went in, it could set the primer off, and we don't want that. Okay, so now we're back to installing the tool or the seater, and it's going to go down the hole. Now I have dropped it in the hole, and as you can see, it's in there, and if I let the handle open a bit, it recedes, and when I push it up, it will seat the primer at the exact depth. Now I'm going to have to stop it again, and I'm going to show you afterwards the next step, because I'm going to put the gate back in now. Now that the gate is back in, I can release it because the gate prevents it from opening too far. Now if I turn it this direction, you can see where the primer holder will be inserted, like so. That's inserted, but I have to put the primers into this little green disc, and it's just thick enough for 1 primer per layer. You can't put 2 one on top of the other. So there's a plastic cover here that I will remove, and the primers will go in here. There's ridges, and when you tap this, these primers will turn over on their own, and they will funnel down this little hole one at a time into the inserter. Now what we will have here is, of course, a cover. The cover will go back on so that the primers will not fall out. Now I'm going to put the primers in there. It will take 2 hands again. Okay, now that I have got everything ready to go, I counted the shells. There's 42 in there, so I want to get 42 of these little primers on there. And as you see, each row has 10, so I can open it up to so that I can get 40. And then I'll add 2, of course. So there's 40. Now very carefully we'll dump them onto the tray, and hopefully I can prop this up so it won't fall out, because if it falls out, these primers will go everywhere and I'll have trouble chasing them. Alright, here we go. Now I will very carefully turn these out on there, and hopefully they won't run all over the place. So I just lost one, I think. Alright, now I need 2 more, and I'll get 2 more out of here. I'll put my fingers over all but 2, and I'll dump those 2 on there. Now, these all have to be turned over, and by gently rocking them you can see how they turn over almost by themselves. So I've got all, they're all turned over. Isn't that neat? Now I'll have to put the plastic cover on, and it has a gate down at the end. You can see through the light will show you that there's a little gate that will prevent them from falling into that ahead of time. And I just bounced it, so I may have turned some of them over. There is one turned over, so I'm going to have to do this again, and it'll take 2 hands. Okay, now that I've got all these in there and they're turned over, everything's turned over in the right direction, I want to make sure that none of them are turned the wrong direction with the shiny side up. This is called the anvil side up. And now that, if you can watch, they will fall into that little canal one at a time. Now we're ready to seat them, and this is going to take 2 hands again. Okay, I finally got my tripod so that I could go a little bit, do a little bit better. If you notice, the primer is now gone, and we have a hole, you know, all the way through the shell. Now I will place the shell into the primer inserter, squeeze the handle very firmly until it's all the way in. I will release it now that the gate is back to where a new primer can fall in, and just drop the shell. As you see, the primer now is in the shell, so seated very nicely the way it should be. Alright, I'll drop it into the container, and we'll do the next one. And I'll seat it very tightly, and we see the primer is seated. Now we go through the whole series, squeezing them, and notice that the little men will line up right into the chute and fall in one at a time as we go through. And it can be a fairly rapid process if you make sure that you press all the way in to seat the primer, because it must be seated properly. And if by chance one of the primers doesn't, just shake it a little bit, or pull the lever again. Alright, that's all there is to it.